We're here.
We're here with another episode of I Can Do It. Ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
Witches, magic, murder, and mystery. Oh,
I'm so proud of you.
5 episodes in, you guys.
Doing it.
I'll forget it next week.
It's fine. I'll remind you.
That's just who I am.
It's okay.
I'm Megan.
I'm Kara.
And this week's story is, I'm filing it under magic.
Okay.
It could also be mystery, probably. Okay. So it is about a professor who worked for Transylvania University.
Okay.
So we'll call it Transy for short, for those of you not around here. I went to Transy for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And whenever I tell people that, people are like, what's it called?
Why?
Transylvania University. And then they're like, was your mascot the vampire? And, all kinds of really...
Hotel Transylvania.
I know. I'm always like, gosh, you're the first person who's ever...
I have never heard that before.
How clever you are.
That is so clever.
So, just because I always feel the need to make this clear.
Right.
Transylvania was not named for the Transylvania that's in, Romania.
Right.
The word Transylvania is Latin for across the woods, which is why... That is, Transy is one of the oldest. I think it might be, I don't know. It's one of the oldest. Old. It's older than Kentucky. It was established before Kentucky became a state.
Yeah.
And so, at the time, that's how they named it, because it was across the woods.
And we're just sticking with it because they stuck with it.
Yes. Transylvania University is not named for vampires. Okay. Dracula did not go there.
Disappointing, but that's fine.
However, there is a curse.
Perfect.
All right, so let's talk about back in the 19th century, adventuring European-born naturalists were all over North America. One of the best known of these explorer, collector, publicist type people is John James Audubon, which you've probably heard of with the birds and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm about to tell you about one of those.
Okay.
Who is basically one of the most eccentric and
I love eccentric
controversial.
People.
Yeah. Oh. Well, remember a few episodes ago, I talked about how I love people who are generally they're kind of seen as jerks because they don't care about being liked.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's this guy.
Oh.
I feel like I would have liked him.
Yeah, he'd be our friend.
Constantine Samuel Rafinesque.
Oh, okay.
It's quite a name. Was one of these adventuring naturalists, and he named 2,700 genera, which is basically, I had to look it up, it's a biological classification of living organisms, fossils, and even viruses.
He's a busy man.
Yes, so he named 2,700 of them, and he wrote about the idea of evolution years before Darwin.
Oh.
But he got no recognition. Yeah. I mean, I went to Transy. I heard of Raph because of the curse, but not because he was actually pretty impressive in all the things that he
Nobody cared about that anymore.
No,
it's all about the curse.
No. Botanical researcher Daniel Moskin calls Rafinesque a flawed genius. He published over 1,000 articles and books, lending some credibility. Okay, I included this quote because I just loved it. His own self-assessment that, whenever I apply myself to anything which I like, I never fail to succeed, if depending on me alone, unless impeded and prevented by lack of means or the hostility of the foes of mankind. So he's just if I like something,
I'm doing it.
I can do whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
Unless these people get in my way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if I don't do it, it's clearly because somebody else is holding me back. Yeah.
I love that.
I just enjoy it.
Yes.
Okay, so let's dig and learn about him.
I'm ready.
All right. Rafinesque was born in 1783 near Constantinople and was known as a polymath, which I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
And that basically just means a really smart person. It just means he's really, really smart in a lot of different areas.
So I had to come up with big words to
you can't just call him a really smart person.
Yeah, he's not intelligent. He's a polymath.
He's so smart, right, that it takes a complicated word. He excelled in various fields of knowledge as a zoologist, botanist, writer, and polyglot.
Oh.
I should have looked up what that word means.
Okay.
He wrote prolifically on such diverse topics as anthropology, biology, geology, and linguistics.
Good grief.
But was honored in none of these fields during his lifetime. So he was basically an outcast in the American scientific community, and his submissions were automatically rejected by leading journals. He was
too out there for them.
Yeah, and he was not liked. He was not easy to like, which is probably part of the problem. At least back then.
Yeah.
When he was 12, he began collecting plants, and by 14, he had taught himself Greek and Latin so he could read the footnotes in the books that he read from his grandmother's libraries.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
I know. For the most part, he was self-educated, And he arrived in Philadelphia at age 19 and began to work in the mercantile house of the Clifford brothers. So for 2 years, he roamed the woods and fields from Pennsylvania to Virginia, and he created collections of plants, and he developed...
I want to do that.
I know. Like, can you imagine what it was like? I mean, look at all the plants that we have here.
Yeah.
You guys don't know this. Maybe we should do a video
little
tour.
Yeah.
Because we record every week in Kara's shop, and she sells plants at her shop, so there's always just this magical assortment.
It's like a little jungle.
It's the best. I love it so much. Just plants everywhere. But back in his day, it's like every plant was new. That's why he named 2,700.
And he's like, I'll take a cutting here. I'll take a cutting here.
And I'm going to name it whatever I want. Yeah. I just love it. So he also during that time developed correspondence with other naturalists.
How cool.
During this time, he applied to be a part of the Lewis and Clark expedition, but was twice turned down by President Thomas Jefferson.
Oh.
So, again,
He said, well,
nobody was helping him.
You're not welcome here.
These are all the people holding him back that he mentioned earlier. He returned to Europe in 1805 and spent the next decade in Sicily. And during this time, his first scientific books were published. He spent the time studying the natural history of plants and fish.
Oh.
Then, in 1815, he came back to the United States.
Okay.
And when he arrived in the United States, he was shipwrecked at Long Island and lost all his collections and his unpublished manuscripts.
He became a Guido?
Yes. And then he was the very first member of the first season of Jersey Shore.
Jim Tan Laundry.
But yeah, like he lost all of his stuff.
That's
like
so
all his
sad.
collections and his unpublished manuscripts. Can you
Dang.
imagine? Oh my God, can you imagine if he'd been working on a manuscript for years and then
Oh my God.
it's gone in the ocean?
Yeah, you can't save that on a jump drive.
Yeah. Everybody go right now and back up all your documents.
Yep.
Okay. Do it because he couldn't. Do
Yep.
it for the ones who came before you.
Do it because everybody held him back.
He stayed in New York for 3 years, and then he took a trip down the Ohio River to start a new collection. And on this trip, he
Is
began...
that where all those giant, crazy-looking catfish came from? He brought
Ohio,
them.
he probably
With all
did.
the weird eyes.
They were-
they have extra fins.
I need you...
They're like
Here's a thing we've
30-pound
never
catfish.
discussed. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I'm terrified of catfish.
Really?
I think they are the scariest. So when we would go to like Lake Cumberland and Harrington Lake, and there's all these stories of giant catfish
Yes.
down by the dam, and where catfish will eat
Oh,
anything.
yeah. They're dirty fish.
They're gross, and they're huge,
They're massive.
and their mouths are huge.
And they make these weird, like, gulping noises.
I don't like them. I don't like them.
Okay, I don't like being in water where I can't see what's brushing up against me. I
Oh,
always
same.
think that, like, one's gonna, like, try to
No, I don't.
get me.
Because it's probably a catfish
Yeah.
who will eat you.
Yeah.
So, like when I go water skiing, which I haven't done in years, and I'm not
Same.
very good at it, but you know, when you fall down when you're water skiing, the boat is gone, and you're
Yeah,
just there
you're
in the
stuck.
middle of the lake.
With water skis attached to you.
Oh, you can't move, and there's probably catfish all over the place. Okay,
They're gonna get you.
I
Oh
hate
god,
it.
oh god, oh god.
I hate it. But Rafinesque probably named a bunch of them. You're
He
right.
probably did.
Okay, so he went down the Ohio River, and on this trip, he began the first comprehensive study of fish in the river. He made it down to Henderson, Kentucky, and he stayed 8 days with John James Audubon, who I mentioned earlier.
John Jacob Jingleheimer.
That's him. Of that visit, I don't think that's actually
That's
him.
not him at
The
all.
33-year-old Audubon wrote, okay, this is a hilarious story.
I love it.
Get ready. Just close
Okay,
your
let's-
eyes and imagine what he's
I'm
the
ready,
picture.
I'm ready.
We had all retired to rest. Every person was in deep slumber, except for myself, when all of a sudden I heard a great uproar in the naturalist's room, which I also think was funny. We called him just the naturalist's room.
The naturalist.
And he's talking about Rafinesque, guys. Okay,
Yeah.
so he heard a big uproar in Rafinesque's room. I got up, reached this place in a few moments, opened the door, when, to my astonishment, I saw my guest running around the room naked,
Oh my god, I love it.
holding That's all I need.
That's all I need.
Holding the handle of my favorite violin, the body of which he had battered to pieces against the walls in an attempt to kill the bats which had entered the open window. I stood amazed.
Same.
When he continued jumping and running around and around until he was fairly exhausted, when he begged me to procure one of the animals for him, as he felt convinced that they belonged to a new species. So this was all about, again,
Yeah.
collecting a new species.
With a violin.
He said, although I was convinced of the contrary, I took up the bow of my demolished violin and administering a smart tap to each of the bats as it came up, soon got specimens enough. So he's just in there with his bow like,
it's like flying.
There's one, there's two. Yeah.
Just enough to make it go unconscious.
This is what like the earliest video games were like.
Yes, duck hunt. It's
same. This is the earliest duck hunt, bat hunt. Rafinesque apparently had better luck capturing bat specimens when he visited Mammoth Cave in south central Kentucky. There
what
he
documented
them with
there. He didn't have a violin.
Oars, probably. There he documented what is now known as the Rafinesque long-eared bat. So it's still called that. And the cave passage, they have very long ears.
Yeah,
that's what I know about
They're
that.
eccentric bats.
The cave passage where he found the bats is named Rafinesque Hall in his honor. In 1818, he was appointed professor of botany and natural science at Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky, and he soon established a reputation as a brilliant teacher. His 8 years at Transy were among his most productive. He published scientific names, both locally and in Europe, for thousands of plants and hundreds of animals. He became really interested in prehistoric Indian sites, and he identified 148 of them in Kentucky alone, and also in Indian languages, leading to his preservation of the Wallam Olam, the epic of the migration of the Delaware Indians.
Oh.
So, like, he was just interested in everything.
Everything.
Yeah. He's a lot like me and you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why our podcast has so many names.
Which is magic, murder, and mystery.
And mystery.
So one of the articles I read about him, they listed all these professional accomplishments. Because right now, like I've mentioned to you that he was a controversial guy. Yeah. But really, you haven't seen
ran
that
naked
yet.
Capturing bats.
There's that one little story.
It's fine.
But up until then, it's just like, here's all his accomplishments. And then it said his personal life was erratic. Which I was like, tell me more.
Tell me all about it.
Okay. Throughout his tenure at Transy, Rafinesque was plagued by quarrels with colleagues, and rumor has it that he became the lover of Mary Austin Hawley, wife of the school's president, the Reverend Horace Hawley.
Oh.
According to Mrs. Hawley, Rafinesque was known for drawing quick sketches of people at various events.
Draw me like one of your
like one of your French girls. One being a sketch of Marquis de Lafayette during his visit to Lexington in 1825. So I went and Googled like,
what did I miss?
Rafinesque. Yeah, that Lafayette. What did I miss? God, I love him
He's
so
my
much.
favorite.
Is like my favorite character in the whole Hamilton.
Yes.
Okay.
Side note.
Definite sidebar, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so I Googled Rafinesque sketches because I just wondered about it. But it makes sense because as a naturalist, he was constantly sketching the different things he discovered to keep record of it. Yeah. There's a listing at, like if you Google online, there's like a collection of 8 sketches, and one of them is of Lafayette for $23,000.
Oh my jeez.
I know. And then apparently Transy's library has a big collection of Rafinesque's things. You'll learn more about this later, but basically, he was not treated well during his lifetime. Like, people didn't respect him. They didn't give him credit for things. Right. And it seems like Transy has tried to do better, like by collecting all his works, collecting his sketches, and sort of giving him a little more recognition. Yeah. He left Transylvania after a quarrel with Hawley, the president, in the spring of 1826 because Hawley didn't like Rafinesque's. This is my own edition. Ready? Because Hawley didn't like Rafinesque's very in-depth study of his wife, probably. Some versions of the story say he was fired. Others say he walked out. Either way, it is said that Rafinesque took his belongings and left Transy. On his way out, cursing both the university and Hawley in an ancient dead language. Oh. Damn thee and thy school as I place a curse upon you. So that's the story.
Okay.
Here's what
that's all it takes to place a curse.
I know. I could curse a lot of people.
I got so many things to do later.
But he's a polymath, so he probably knows the best way to curse anybody.
Right. Because those polymaths are few and far between.
Here's what Raph's own autobiography says about the curse. Returning from a trip to Philadelphia in 1825, he found his rooms in the college had been broken open. One had been given to students, and his collections and books were in disarray.
Aw.
Rafinesque blamed the violation on Hawley's hatred against sciences, and he wrote, "I took lodgings in town and carried there all my effects, thus leaving the college with curses on it and Hawley." So,
But
like,
not his wife.
that's a little...
He put other moves on her.
Yeah. So, but I mean, he did say, "I left the college with curses on it," like in his own autobiography.
Yeah.
And then Hawley, okay, after that, President Hawley was ousted from power by his own board.
Oh.
And a year after he left Transy, he died of yellow fever.
Oh.
Then, 2 years after that,
Curse you.
the Transylvania Administration building, which is called Old Morrison, was destroyed in a fire.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's still called Old Morrison. They've rebuilt it now 3 times.
Jeez.
Or, I'm sorry, they built it once and then rebuilt it twice.
Yeah.
Okay, so that administration building was rebuilt, but it caught on fire again in 1969.
Oh.
He moved to Philadelphia from there,
Okay.
and he basically finished out the rest of his life in the United States and became a naturalized U.S. citizen. Some of the things, like just talking again about his accomplishments, he believed that each variety of a species is a deviant, which through reproduction may become a permanent species. So that basically, if you think about that for a second, each deviant through reproduction may become a permanent species. That is evolution.
Yeah.
So he was one of the very first early users of the term evolution to refer to a species changing over time. And for context, this was in 1832 when the young Charles Darwin was still exploring South America. So he did it first.
You
guys.
know what? His transcripts didn't wash away Darwin found them.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yep.
Now
Solve
we
that
know.
conspiracy.
Now we know.
Yep.
Although Rafinesque's scientific abilities were recognized in his lifetime, he was also severely criticized for sometimes doing careless work and his tendency to establish new genera and species. He was what is known as a splitter, meaning he saw variations within species as evidence of different species.
Oh.
Yeah. So remember earlier when I said he'd named something like 2,700 genera? Only 50 to 60% of those are still in use. Like, I think they figured out that, like, those weren't all different species. They were just, basically he was just too much for the emerging
He was a lot to
botany
handle.
and natural history establishment, and they turned against him.
Jeez.
So this reputation for being kind of a difficult guy
Yeah.
lasted well into the 20th century. More recent historians and botanists have been kinder. This is what Moskin, that guy I spoke about earlier, he said, had he more credibility with his peers, his ideas on the formation of new genera and species may have invited additional exploration from other brilliant biological minds of the time, perhaps advancing the science of evolutionary biology by decades.
Jeez.
So they think we still would have got there, but we'd have got there quicker.
Yeah.
If we paid more attention. Yeah. He traveled extensively, collected specimens wherever he went, and wrote and published constantly. He authored more than 950 publications on natural history, banking, economics, the Bible, and verse. I'm telling you, everything. He died of cancer in Philadelphia in 1840 and was buried in a potter's field in Philadelphia. In the 1920s, the cemetery containing his remains was set to be destroyed. Oh. And as I mentioned, Transy kind of came around to the idea that this was a valuable,
he was
person
a smart man
and deserved some respect. So when they heard that this was going to happen, they said, we are going to go get his remains and bring them back to Transy. So they excavated.
He cursed them?
I know. That's what I think is so funny. So it's like they excavated the gravesite and brought him back to Transy, and they placed him in a tomb under the steps of the now rebuilt Old Morrison. So it burned down the first time. And then it was rebuilt. They put him in a tomb underneath the steps.
Were they like, it's not going to burn down again if he's in it?
Right. Except it did.
Oh, God.
When it burned in 1969, it said it gutted every room except for the one where his tomb is. I know.
Oh, he said, I'm closer, guys. This is a mistake.
But I also think they brought him back to try to appease him from the curse. And I'm like, but he hated you. He doesn't want to spend his eternity at Transy.
No.
So
you are just trying to get rid of your own curse. Like,
doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't fix it.
So I found an article that described like what the tomb is like, which you're allowed to go in. You can take a tour and visit. But after unlocking an unmarked door set flush in the corridor wall of a building called Old Morrison, which is that administration building that's burned down twice. No, it burned down twice. The guide slowly pushes back 2 creaking iron grills to reveal a cubicle room with no windows, dimly lit by indirect light. The dusty concrete floor and peeling plaster of this room is in sharp contrast with the fresh paint, polished brass, and gleaming pegged floors elsewhere in the building. It's an above-ground tomb, which is completely covered by what appears to be a stone slab, and the tomb slab contains the inscription, "Honor to whom honor is overdue."
Oh.
Which that's nice, I think.
Yeah.
Like I said, in 1969, it burned down again, and every room except for the one with his tomb was destroyed.
That's crazy.
It's now been rebuilt again.
Okay.
Do you know where Old Morrison is? If you go down by Gratz Park.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like, if you're local guys, you go to Gratz Park, it's the one that has like all the steps. It's white. It has all the steps leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
And around Halloween is when they do Pumpkin Mania.
Yes.
And they have like hundreds of hand-carved pumpkins on the steps of Old Morrison. So that's, under those steps is where his tomb is. You're still
stepping
there.
on him.
So here's what we've learned since then. In the cemetery in Philadelphia where Raff was originally buried, bodies were buried 6 deep. He died in poverty. It was a potter's field. So in the 84 years between the time he was buried and the time that they excavated his body and brought it to Transy, 3 other bodies were buried on top of his.
So we don't know that this was him.
It's not him. So they basically, because
like,
they
oh no,
they were able to look at an autopsy report
of
when he died. He died of cancer. And they know from that autopsy report that his skull shouldn't have been intact. There's things about it that they look at the autopsy report and then they look at the remains and they're like, this is not him. So they've done their best to try to figure out who it is. And they think the remains actually belong to a woman named Mary Passamore.
Wait, don't women have different pelvic bones?
Well, I don't know. And I don't know how much. So I saw another, because I kind of wondered that too. Like, how would you not know? But I think he had been dead for a long time.
Right.
And I don't know. I think they just thought, this is the plot where he was buried.
Right.
That's him.
Let's
you know what I
just
mean?
take this body.
Without taking into account,
let's take this skeleton.
How many are down there. Right.
Wow. Guys, we don't want to dig anymore. I'm just going to...
This is him.
This one on
this
top,
probably
I'm
him.
pretty sure is it. It's, it may look a little small.
Right.
It's fine. It's fine.
So
we've seen him naked. It's okay.
He jumps around chasing bats with the violin. So like I said, I had heard of him because I was a student at Transy.
Right.
And it's a thing. Like there was a cafe on campus called the Rathskeller, which it's not there anymore, but it was there when I was there. And it was just sort of known about this story. And we have it's the Transylvania Pioneers is the mascot, but the unofficial mascot is affectionately called Raff, and it's the Rafinesque's big-eared bat.
Oh.
And instead of a typical homecoming week, students at Transy celebrate Raff Week in honor of Rafinesque. Students
Do they go around with violins?
No,
bats?
but maybe we should.
I think we need to start.
Maybe they just don't know the story.
Maybe that's an event we should have at the coffee shop.
Raff Week. Students celebrate the creepy legacy of Rafinesque by holding a raffle for students to sleep in his tomb and through Pumpkin Mania, which I talked about earlier. So supposedly the curse strikes every 7 years. But when I look at the timing of things that happen, that doesn't really seem to be true. I think that's just, lore. People want there to be like every 7 years.
Why would it be 7? Like he
know.
hated them so much. It's probably all the time.
I mean, well, so that's the thing. So we have what happened to Holly, where he lost his job and died of yellow fever.
Yeah.
Then Old Morrison burned down twice. The second time his tomb wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the 1960s.
Now they've replaced his body in a tomb with a woman.
It's not even him.
No.
So that's not helping appease him at all. But it would have appeased him anyway. Because he hated you.
He hated it. So now he's just laughing at him. He's like, suckers.
In the 1960s, a Transy student named Betty Gale Brown was mysteriously killed in her car in front of Old Morrison.
I've read about that.
Yeah, her bra was used as a strangling device, but medical records say she was not molested in any way, and nothing of note in her car was stolen. Yes. Okay, I went down a rabbit hole on this.
Yeah, to try. I started to one day.
Well, there's not a... No. So, for one, they still never have figured out who killed her.
No, it's an unsolved
mystery.
There
is a guy, I can't think of his name, Nolan Ray George, something like that. Mm-hmm. He was suspected. He's a local serial killer who I think was in Ohio, Kentucky, and Virginia.
Oh.
And so I was like, I'll do an episode on him. No, but he strangled women with their undergarments.
Oh, okay.
And it seems like he was a serial killer who operated in the late 60s.
Oh.
But wasn't convicted of anything
Right,
until
and they
like
don't
the
have any
2000s.
DNA evidence
Well, they've
or
convicted him. I mean, he's in prison now, but like there's just nothing out there about him. I couldn't
Yeah.
do an episode on him, but maybe on one of our lives I can talk, because I do have like some research on
Yeah.
him. It's just not enough for a full episode.
Yeah.
In the 80s, a workman fell to his death while repairing the gymnasium
I remember
roof.
that. Yeah, I
And
remember hearing about
people,
that.
when that happened, they talk about the curse of Rafinesque.
Uh-huh.
And then, while I was there, our freshman year, I messaged a few of my freshman year friends to ask, because I was like, was this our freshman year or our sophomore year?
Yeah.
But there was this thing, we all called it the Transy Plague.
I love it.
And it was on the news. Like, it's just, everybody got sick. And I got sick. Like, I had to go to the hospital, a bunch of people. And it was the weirdest thing when, I remember, first of all, you heard about it for about 24 hours before I got it. But it was like, everybody's just sick. They're just really bad stomach virus, super dehydrated. And so finally, like, once it hit me, my RA was like, you need to go to the hospital. So we went, and we went to the closest hospital, and they knew when I walked in and said, like, I'm from Transy, and they were like, oh, okay. Because they had so many of our students there.
Oh my gosh.
And when I walked through the ER, they had them like several, like there were multiple students in one like bay.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? And the lights were off because everybody's asleep, but they were just like pumping you full of fluids because you got so sick in such a short period of time that we were all dehydrated. And so, yeah, I mean, I didn't have to stay overnight, but they kept me there. But it was just like one of those weird things that I read an article that was like, there are weird things that happen on campus. There's illnesses that happen here that don't happen anywhere else. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh.
I remember that.
Was
the Transy
it
plague.
plague.
Was it? Yeah. Was it the curse?
Yeah.
They never did figure out. They ended up saying it must have been a staph infection that the whole student body got, basically.
It's crazy.
But they never really did figure out what it was or what caused it.
What?
And then everybody just got better. Yeah. I know. Weird. So,
That's wild.
So maybe if you guys hadn't been jerks to Rafinesque back in the day, I wouldn't have gotten sick.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole student body wouldn't have had stomach problems.
If you went to Transy in 1998 and got the Transy plague, please
tell us.
Please
all
tell us.
about it.
Send us a message at the Witches Magic Murder Mystery
Yep.
at gmail.com.
So
good. Twice.
Yep.
Twice in one
So
episode.
good.
I remember the name.
So
So
proud
yeah,
of you.
that's the story of Rafinesque
It's so good.
and his curse. I know.
love eccentric people so much.
I do too. Well, I just like the whole thing of like he placed this curse and then they brought his body back and then it's the wrong body. Like there's just so much insanity to that story.
And like they created a tomb for it and everything. Like, oh, we're gonna honor him.
Honor to whom honor is overdue. And
to this woman.
I wonder who she was.
I know, like she was just tossed in a grave.
She was in a potter's field, so she
yeah
was in poverty. And
do they keep books of that?
I'm sure they do. I mean, somehow they were able to connect her name to that grave. You know,
I
somehow
wonder
they
what
know
she
it's
did.
her.
Let's figure out who she was.
Yeah, because she's got a really nice resting place
dedicated to her.
Yeah.
Wow,
So that's it.
that's great.
Do you know what your next episode's going to be about?
I don't yet. There's a couple floating around in my head.
Yeah.
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have a few that I'm looking into.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing of trying to find, because, you know, we both listen to a million podcasts. And it's like, I want to find a story that hasn't been told a million times.
Right. Yeah. Same.
But then also finding stories like that there's enough to do a full episode about.
Yes,
that's
because
hard.
some stuff you're like, oh my gosh, this is it. And then you're like, where does this go?
Right.
I don't know where this
Yeah.
went. This is like a 10-second thing.
Uh,
So if you all have suggestions of anything,
yeah, email us that. Like
if you
I
have
said,
favorite stories, local lore.
yeah, it doesn't have to be Kentucky related.
No.
If you just have like a little known story that you think would be interesting for people to hear, let us know. But we are super interested in Kentucky ones, especially.
Oh yeah. Well, it's just creepy knowing
Yeah,
you're around it and you're like, oh, that happened.
yeah.
Ooh,
That was here
Let's
down
do
this
it.
street.
we're gonna. Oh, okay. That's happening.
All right, so you can find us on Instagram at
Witches Magic Murder Mystery
and then you can find Kara
at Oak and Maine, and you can find you.
at Megan_Whitmer. I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. Please subscribe, share it with your friends.
Share with all the friends. Share our page on Instagram with your friends.
Yeah, leave us a review. If you could take a few minutes, it doesn't have to be some big, amazing work of art, but if you could just take a few minutes and write a few words about what you like, that'd be great.
Even if it's like, this isn't my style, but it's great.
Yeah.
Like, I still would appreciate that.
You could even say, I don't know about the podcast, but Megan and Kara,
they're great.
They're real great.
They're great.
I like
all
them.
We need.
I like them a lot. That's what you
all
say.
we need.
5 stars.
Yep. As long as you hit 5 stars and then leave something.
Yeah.
As long as you don't tell us you hate us, that's okay.
Yeah, that's the important thing to know.
Yeah, if we don't want to know if you hate us, it's fine.
All right, you guys have a good week. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.